We'll talk about some more gaming inclusion. We're about to talk to an accessibility gaming developer god right now. And I'm so happy to have me right now. A great friend of mine, great person in the video game development world. I'm telling you, yes, especially when it comes to accessibility on this GAD 2020, the great Sam Thompson, senior producer, Sony Interactive Worldwide Studios. Sam, how are you, brother?
Paul, I'm doing well. That's an incredible introduction, one that I'll never be able to live up to. But thank you very much.
Now, for the people who know you, you definitely live up to it, Sam. Now, before we start our conversation, I want to wish you and your family safety during this time of this pandemic.
Thank you, sir. Likewise to you as well. I hope you and your family are doing well.
Appreciate it, my friend. You know, this kind of reminds me of this GAD 2020 of us being together a few years ago and having a wonderful GAD event. Mm-hmm. We talked about a lot of great things, and now because of this pandemic, we can't meet like we used to meet. So we have to have these virtual kind of events. So I'm so happy that you decided to be a part of this with us, Sam. Now, before we talk about accessibility and everything, what is your role at Sony Interactive Entertainment?
So I am the manager, senior producer with Worldwide Studios at Sony Interactive Entertainment, and I am the day-to-day producer working with Naughty Dog on the SIE side. So every project that Naughty Dog is working on, we are a part of.
Nice, nice. And Sam, you know what? One of these days, I gotta have you on just talk about your story to how you got into gaming, because that's amazing. But we'll save that for another show because it's really incredible. And
too kind, my friend, too kind.
Yes.
Too kind.
And Sam, when it comes to the first time you were approached about accessibility in gaming, what were some of the things that went through your mind? Because you're already in the industry for many years.
That's true. It was really, really interesting, actually. I think, I think back to the 5 stages of grief because I went through all of them rather quickly. We were working on Uncharted Collection at the time, and that's when Joshua Straub had reached out to Naughty Dog and Alex and Amelia and asked them about, there was a particular part of the game that required a QuickTime event that he couldn't get through for rapid button pressing. And I'd been, one of the things that we do a lot in our development process is the UX and bringing in consumers to play our products and then taking that information, analyzing it, sharing it with the team. And through all of the years that we've been doing this, I really hadn't strongly considered accessibility up until that point. So it was a pretty profound moment where, for the better part of a decade and a half, we had been doing these tests and we had failed to consider some of the gameplay mechanics that we were leveraging so heavily were actually barriers to some players. And once you kind of looked at that and understood what that was, you really saw the whole gaming industry differently, and you really start to internalize what it means to make game accessible and make experiences that everybody can play and interact with. And then you start thinking about things, the caveats of the things that people normally raise as barriers, right? Like it's going to water down the design or make gameplay too easy, or we don't have the resources or schedule, or it's going to take development in a different direction, right? All of those things are, they do come to mind. I mean, the first time you start to look into accessibility, you really panic about what it's going to do to the product schedule and how it's going to change the way people perceive this work of art. But that's really not the way. And, I've been blessed to work with teams on the first party side, predominantly Naughty Dog. But, there are other groups that we have in the first party family that are also very, very dedicated to accessibility. And one thing that I've learned over the years working with these wonderful folks is that once the team starts to really understand accessibility and what it means to look at this as a core gameplay pillar, as a core development philosophy, you start integrating it earlier and earlier in the development process, and then all of a sudden it becomes a part of the fabric of what the team does. And it's no longer, accessibility isn't part of a conversation anymore. It's a given. It's a known, right? We're making accessible experiences now. And what we're doing is talking about how to make them even more accessible. So it's pretty profound and impactful. but it takes a few years, right? It's not something that immediately you just kind of, the light switch goes on, and then you have to really work to understand the scope and breadth of what you're trying to achieve.
And Sam, this may cause some developers, some studios out there to kind of push back a little bit because of the extra work that's involved. So what would you tell them? Why is it so important to embrace this accessibility in gaming and go that extra mile like you guys have done with Naughty Dog, Santa Monica Studios, to some of the great strides that you guys have achieved?
You know, there's Josh Straub had imparted some wisdom a few years ago to me that still holds true today. And he had told me, we will never be more capable as gamers than we are at this moment right now. And not only does mindful development make games more accessible now for everyone, but it also future-proofs those experiences for future versions of ourselves. And when he had said that, I thought it was pretty profound, and I tucked it away in my mind, but I didn't really kind of internalize what he meant. But when you look at how we interact with the products we make and the games we play, I'm finding myself sitting farther and farther away from the TV. Living room, has changed. Maybe TV's change. I may need captions. Some days I do play with subtitles because it's hard to see the UI in certain products that I like to play. Multiplayer has its own host of challenges and interesting barriers that sometimes may not be a barrier for me. Like, sometimes I need to play with the audio down and I need other ways to hear what's going on around me. At any rate, I think it's really important that we embrace and support accessibility. And the only way to really make sure that we as a generation are going to be able to enjoy these experiences for years to come is to make gameplay experiences that incorporate this aspect of development, right? That we need to consider that there are many different ways that people approach interacting with our products, and we need to make them as accessible as they can be.
And well said, Sam. Well said. And when we look at what you guys were able to accomplish with Uncharted 4, that was transformational. I mean, it really just flipped the script when it came to gaming development and accessibility. What have you witnessed or maybe heard of that showed that we may need to push the envelope even further with accessibility feature? Did you witness anyone trying to play maybe Uncharted and you're like, hey, we need to do this, we need to do that, or we need to shift our focus to that? Did you ever witness anything like that? And if so, how did that kind of shift your focus?
Well, I think, I've been pretty blessed to work with tremendous teams that are very mindful of accessibility and really care about how consumers interact with their products. I think watching players kind of use the tools that we provide and also different, what's interesting, I guess, let me back up. Going back to UX testing and all of our accessibility work, we get to see a lot of players come in with a lot of varying skill sets. And oftentimes we're aggressively looking for players that fit a lot of different mediums. So we get the most, the richest data we can when we're testing our products. Sometimes we bring in folks for accessibility testing that have specific disabilities that we're looking for. And I remember back on Uncharted 4, specifically for multiplayer and the single-player campaign, we were looking into our custom controller configurations for one-handed control and trying to better understand how players would utilize them, or if we were even close to making something that was functional. And we had this young man that had come in, and he had just lost his hand in a motorcycle accident about a year prior. And he had adapted controlling the camera with his chin. And it's a pretty usable adjustment. A lot of people that are in that position tend to migrate to that control config. And we had asked him, hey, would you mind just trying this one-handed control configuration for us and just see if you liked it and if it was useful? And he was very resistant to it. He didn't want to have anything to give him a leg up or to change the way he played the game with everybody else. He wanted it to be, I don't care about those things. I'm going to find a way to play the game so I am just like everybody else, and I'm going to kick their ass doing it, pardon my French. And and I love that. I love that about, the way he approached the game. But eventually we did get him to try that one-handed configuration. And I remember his reaction was just this profound, like, holy cow, I don't have to worry so much now about controlling it with my chin. This thing is working, it's intuitive, and now I can work on other aspects of my multiplayer. I can work on enjoying other aspects of the game because I'm not so concerned with how do I manipulate the right analog stick with my chin. And I think, when you see those types of things and you get to witness people enjoying the products that you're making and understanding that these things are there, not to be used as a crutch, but to provide different ways for people to interact with the product. It's really rewarding. We were at the Abilities Expo a few years ago in LA, and we had some demos set up there at the PlayStation booth where we had consumers come in and they got their chance to play Insomniac and Marvel's Spider-Man using some of the accessibility features that Insomniac and Marvel had implemented into the product. And there were a lot of people that came up that had recently had an accident or become disabled, and they thought that they would never be able to game again. And playing these games and realizing that there were features and functionalities there specifically for their types of disability in mind, allowing them to be able to interact with the products. Just looking at their reaction to those things was kind of priceless, and it still sticks with me today.
Yeah, I remember that too, Sam, when we had the young kids playing, and just the joy in their heart. It really just warmed our heart and mind. We were so thankful to have you guys there. And when it comes to these accessibility features, is it just for ones who has physical disabilities, or can others use them?
Oh, it's funny. Everybody can use accessibility features. It's there are obviously temporary disabilities, situational disabilities, right? It's not just about being disabled by an accident or having a medical condition, but you could be in a bedroom with your loved one late at night, and you're trying to play a game, and they're trying to sleep. You could have you could break your arm or sprain your wrist, right? All these things change the way you interact with the product. And it's not just about that. It's literally, I think sometimes people want the freedom to be able to interact with the product the way that they feel like they want to do it. I totally get that a lot of design teams, a lot of development teams want to they have a certain vision for how people play their games. But when you look at the way people are interacting with those products, they're doing it in a lot of different ways and doing it well. So I think it's up to us. It's our job as publishers and as development teams to craft experiences that everyone can interact with, that can be played in a number of different ways, that are not heavy-handed and don't require forcing players to only have one way to do something. It's just good design, right? Like, you want to be able to, the product needs to anticipate how people interact with it and provide multiple paths for completion. I mean, that's intuitive design 101.
That's so true. And Sam, I want to game with my 85-year-old pops, and I know his reaction time is not as strong as it used to because he had a stroke a few years ago. So if I can put these accessibility features in and game with him, man, that would be crazy. I'm gonna put that on YouTube so we can all see that. Sam, that's gonna
I see that.
That's gonna be awesome. And Sam, are there any memories that you often look back on that really kind of reinforce the idea why accessibility in gaming matters and why it's so important?
That's a pretty deep question, Paul. I think every day we work with gamers of all ages, ethnicity, gender, skill levels, and they help us better understand how players interact and engage with our products. It's interesting, the more that we learn about our consumers and the people that play our products, we find that the core pillar of our development philosophy as far and as long as I can remember, at least within the last decade, has always been, looking at our UX testing models, look at our developmental DNA, and try to be more mindful of how people interact with our products. And for me, when I think back to all the games that we've worked on in the past and reflect on all the things that we've accomplished, I like to look at how we could have done things differently and how we could possibly make changes and be mindful of how to approach these challenges in the future. It's interesting when you work in this industry for as long as I have, games have come a long way. If you look back at the original Crash, man, that gameplay is brutal. And playing the Crash Insanity Collection when Activision released it was a great blast in the past for me, but it reminded me of how hard video games used to be and the ones that we were working on. Jack and Daxter and the Burning Bush challenges is another great example of, we're asking a lot of our players to be so good at those games. I think that there's obviously an opportunity to continue on in that approach, but also be mindful that, just like shoe size is different for everybody, skill levels are varied, and they differ in the amount of time people have, the amount of mastery that they want to experience. All of those things vary. And for us to craft and experience an artistic vision, we need to make them as accessible, for lack of a better word, as possible, right? So more people can enjoy them the way that they want to enjoy them and experience them. So to me, I think it's looking back and being mindful of the direction and the path we've taken to get here, but taking that information and understanding that the path forward is going to provide a lot of opportunities for us to create more accessible experiences and further explore just the full range of accessibility for all the products that we release.
Yeah, you said it, Sam. It seems like things get better and better, when it comes to accessibility, and we look forward to just what that means 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and what it really looks like. Before I let you go, anything else out there you'd like to articulate to the viewer or the listener just about GAD?
Well, I think it's really important that we celebrate kind of all aspects of Global Accessibility Awareness Day. Everybody can do their part. It doesn't take a development team or a publishing wing or you don't have to be the leader of industry. You can take a look around you and find ways to make everyday life more accessible for those around you. And just thinking about the little things that you take for granted often can manifest into real world significant changes or ways that you can improve things for everybody around you. Everybody has aging adults in their lives, right? They have young children. One of the most profound things for me was just watching my daughter game and learn gaming as she was growing up, and understanding the differences and challenges with small hands and motor skill progression, and being able to kind of help her along the way, and watching her kind of grow and develop was a very profound impact on how I look and approach these types of challenges for the games that we work on. So I think that all of us can take time to just look and start with our families and look at how we interact with them on a daily. Look at our friends and their friends and everybody in our workplace, and we can find ways to make a difference. It doesn't have to take a lot. It doesn't have to take much investment. Little things go a long way.
Well said, Sam. Well, Sam, and we appreciate what you do and the great folks over there at Sony PlayStation. Just amazing, and we look forward to what the future holds. And always great catching up with you, my friend.
Thank you, Paul. We got some great stuff in store. You're gonna be a happy guy, I promise.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it.